Welcome, one and all, to this webinar session. My name is Jim Fry. I'm a principal analyst with Enterprise Strategy Group. Our title today is Inference at the Edge, Transforming Retail with AI and Real-Time Insights. This is a really exciting topic, and I'm really looking forward to having a conversation today around it. It's a key topic for both IT and line of business. Everyone's looking at AI, how to take advantage of it, how to leverage it. And of course, you have to apply it, right? So today's focus in particular is going to be retail. It's going to be the brick and mortar type of retail. And we're going to talk about how to take advantage of AI and platforms that can support AI in order to put retailers in position to optimize their stores and how their stores operate. Now, AI by in and of itself is really not a magic button. It doesn't do it all on its own. You have to apply AI and you have to come up with a strategy around technology and delivery that's going to really give you the chance to take advantage of these new innovations that we see happening around us every day and we expect to be coming down the road. But to put retailers in the best position really to take advantage of that to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of their store operations and sales both today and down the road in the future. Now, to help understand and discuss this topic, it really is my distinct pleasure and honor to be joined today by two very experienced panelists. I'd like to start by introducing Abhishek Jain of Google Distributed Cloud. Abhi, would you please do us a favor and tell us about your role and what you do for Google Distributed Cloud?
Sure. Thanks, Jam. Hey, I'm Abhi. I've been at Google for 17 years, leading product and partnership for products like Search, Android, and Google Fiber. In my current role, I lead operations and partnerships for Google Distributed Cloud, where we are responsible for helping GDC, which is Google Distributed Cloud, grow and scale, leveraging our ecosystem of partners.
Excellent, thanks. And also joining us today from Intel is Munib Minazuddin. Munib, did I get your name right?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, good. And would you do the same for us? Tell us a little bit about your role and what you do for Intel.
Sure. My name is Maneem Nazuddin. I've been at Intel for about 2 years now, and I'm focused on network and edge. I run the software components of all the network and edge across edge compute, edge AI, and application delivery for Intel. So
Thanks, Munib. Well, let's dive right in then, shall we? So, our topic today involves AI inferencing and the application of AI and how it's going to apply to retail store settings. So, before we really get into the details of how we're going to make that happen on the technical side, let's kind of talk about building some contracts around the specific objectives that retailers have at the store level. So let's talk a little bit about the business priorities that we should be keeping in mind in this conversation so that we can understand how that's going to translate into AI-enabled applications. Now, Abhi, you've been tracking this from the GDC side. What sort of things have you seen and heard?
Yes, Jim, that's a great question on GDC. As you can imagine, we have been working very closely with our retail customers, and it seems they're all very laser focused on improving in-store customer experience, improving profitability in the store itself, right? So you can imagine the key applications that they are all focused on is how to improve loss prevention. That seems like a big problem for all the retailers. They want to have a better tracking of inventory and mobility of inventory so that loss prevention teams can track and address these issues even before it happens. They want to improve in-store checkout experience. You can imagine at the busy hours due to connectivity, some of these stores might encounter issues with the checkout experience, and that is where they want to improve in-store customer experience so that they can keep improving their top line revenue growth in there. The other experience that we have seen is everyone wants to wow their customers when they're in the store. So personalization is a key aspect. That personalization has existed a lot in the online space, and they want to extend it to the offline experience also. So you can imagine they want to run analytics in store to help customers find what they're looking for and personalize that experience. Those are some of the experiences that we hear from our retail customers. At the same time, to enable these experiences, they need to focus on open, agile, and flexible strategy. And what does that mean? By open, we mean when they're building applications, they want to use the best open source technology. In terms of agility, they want to make sure that they're being able to build in cloud and extend into the edge. And when it comes to flexibility, think about hardware and software stack that you can build working with the partners to build something that's flexible and scalable.
Yeah, I think we're going to get into a lot more about that here as we go into the conversation today. Manib, what else would you add from the Intel perspective?
No, I think Abhi hit a lot of the key points that I think retailers are looking to leverage. I would say a lot of them operate on very kind of thin margins, right? So basically, how can they increase margin, right? So I think in a lot of those margin done through efficiencies, and wherever there is those margins get hurt are from things like loss, which is what they're worried about, because they're already on thin margins. As they rolled out self-service checkouts, they're starting to see those kind of loss, both from, call it, theft and fraud, right? So I've heard them use those terminologies where you're only scanning some of the items that you shopped, or you are actually swapping labels from low cost to high cost, and saving some money that way, which becomes more complicated to analyze, because if you just are counting things, that's easier. But how do you then also measure a price tag to an item? That becomes more complicated in analysis. But one aspect of that margin improvement is loss, and how do you do that? Second part of that, margin increase is also impacted by the experiences, which I think you touched upon, right? How do I wow the customer? So digital has been good, online's been good, but you now start to see that blending of brick and mortar and digital experiences, AR, VR kind of technologies walk in. I'll personalize it for you. So a lot of them kind of going down that path to increase the spend, and call it, you come in to shop for such certain things, but you get wowed by additional things and buy what wasn't in your shopping list, right? So how do they kind of increase that store spend? So that blending of that brick and mortar experiences is what they're doing. A lot of them is like, hey, customer facing. Also, they're investing in a lot of dark stores. They expediting the supply chain, like you can order everything online, pick up from a local site. So extending that infrastructure beyond a store facility to more dark stores, where you can have expedite your supply chains there for the shipment times. Because I think we think about it very much as in-store experiences, but they're also building robust supply chains to expedite that through dark store infrastructure. And those dark stores, new technologies like drones, all of that being experimented, because that's less, how should I say, there's not people there, right? So it's dark store, so you can do a lot more efficient automation in that environment. So
Yeah, some pretty interesting evolutions for sure. And interesting to see how online is now beginning to affect the brick and mortar or physical store locations, and what retailers are trying to do on behalf of their customer experience. So very interesting. Let's turn to start talking now about how we can operationalize AI to kind of cover some of these goals that we were just talking about here. So, Enterprise Strategy Group has been doing research on a pretty continuous basis on the ways that AI is getting applied across all sorts of industries. And of course, there are common use cases, but then there are unique needs of each sector as well, such as retail. So, for retail organizations, at least at the corporate level, some of the things we've been hearing lately are, emphasis on things like supply chain optimization, things like trying to personalize the shopping experience and the marketing that's being done to individual shoppers wherever they are. Adding the concept of chatbots and virtual assistants, at all different levels of the customer experience, including in store. Making product recommendations as part of that, and making merchandising choices, figuring out how to organize and present, merchandise in a way that's attractive and engaging, and of course, fraud detection, prevention, and more. So, some of these will be applications that are looked at on a global corporate basis, and you'll be gathering data from all of the stores to feed into a corporate level view of things. But then you want to turn around and send some of the findings and the actual actions back down to the store level. So this is where we talk about inferencing at the store level, right? So I think it's interesting to look at how we can make a difference with AI in the retail experience. But let's talk a little bit more about kind of the the potential barriers to achieving this. So, Manib, I'll start with you. What is the Intel team hearing about some of the, maybe some of the technical barriers that folks are facing to make this a reality?
Yeah, I think a lot of the, I call it, especially as we get into the AI topic there, Jim, I think a lot of stuff comes around. Now you're dealing with data and aspects of consumers information, so it's about data privacy. How do you do that? You've got cameras everywhere. Are you able to anonymize that data, do that? So there's one level of data security, privacy, what you can do, which is because you're dealing with sensitive data. So now when aspects, I'm going to do it in this, call it in 2 or 3 buckets, right? One is wow, customer experience, personalize it. Can I then track somebody and then personalize it? That requires data, but is that crossing the line of privacy, things like that? So one aspects of how you could use AI. Other things, like you said, hey, we'll use loss and theft detections. This is call it store operations, right? So one is customer experience, second is store operations, and store operations in front of the store and the store operation in the back of the store. Front of the store is wow experiences, personalization. How do I do all of those aspects with data privacy, AI ethics in mind? Back of the store is how do I drive better operations? And I think in this instance, again, if you are, we call it generally retailers, but if you're in food and groceries, one of the biggest losses is perishable goods. And if I can actually monitor and do that and can, like, save costs from perishable goods, then how do I use that data to mine and be more effective so I can get a longer lifetime of the perishable good on the shelf, right? So some of those metrics can you drive through AI. Second, one of the customers we've been working with, this is more in the loading docks. They're receiving a lot of damaged pallets. So they huge operation, let's call it that way, right? So they have a lot of incoming goods through loading bays, outgoing, right? So they were getting a lot of damaged pallets, and costing them. It's a global chain, so costing them a couple of $100 million a year just underwriting insurance cost on these damaged pallets. So we're giving them more AI based inferencing as these trucks arrive in the loading bay before they're unloaded. We can immediately look at that and say, hey, this percentage of pallets are damaged, don't receive the goods, send it back, so you're not taking the hit on that underwriting that insurance. This is still kind of call it operations in the back end, not the wow customer would like to think of, but AI with human accuracy was 60%, AI is getting them 99.8% accuracy. So that's a huge amount of saving, and no amount of kind of human kind of solutions are going to solve for that, right? So I think that speed and efficiency. So I call it both that customer experience as well as the operations, that value you can get. The biggest challenges while trying to do this is the call it the non-standardized amount of data that's available, right? So a lot of we're talking about AI and inferencing, but the data sources, the data protocols, the data standardized standards don't exist between different point of sale systems to perishable goods systems to SAP systems to ERP. Like all of these systems are different types of data, sources of data. There's no standardized way of processing. So a lot of the technical challenges is how do I normalize the data sets and then drive inferencing around that, and with context, if I'm using it for experiences, for better operations, or for all of those, becomes a lot of those challenges. And I think what's happening more likely is closed box, solutions are arriving, solving a problem. We talked about loss prevention. There's a closed box solution, soups to nuts, hardware, software, apps delivered. So suddenly at the edge, you're finding, this 8, 10, 12 pizza boxes, each solving a problem. Digital mirror solution, fraud detection, loss prevention. I have these, perishable cooler screens, if you've seen cooler screens. So all of them have these interesting tech, but it's coming in a siloed way.
Yeah, interesting. And that creates new problems in itself because, as you said, there's not common formats for data. I think data is going to be the biggest challenge. And that's why I think you've got to figure out how to gather data from the store locations and then figure out how you're going to analyze that, probably in a more centralized location, to build the models that'll be used for better assessments, out of the stores after sort of training the AI models that we're looking at creating. So interesting. Abhi, anything you'd like to add to what Muniba said around the sort of the challenges for deploying AI?
Absolutely. I think Munib covered some of the very, very relevant challenges that retailers are seeing. But to add to those, I think you can imagine building, deploying, and scaling use cases, whether it's a loss prevention use case or a customer experience improvement use case. It's not only about the better AI foundational model, it is also about AI optimized software infrastructure, right? And I think these are some of the key challenges that we see decision makers, in addition to what Munib already covered, are going to kind of address in short to medium term. The first one is technical challenges, right? You can imagine at the edge, the infrastructure that's available today is legacy. How do you make the AI tools, the modern AI tools, work on these legacy systems? Would require substantial investment to make sure that these legacy systems are upgraded, right? Think about bandwidth and unreliable connectivity in some of these stores. And especially if you're trying to do real time data analytics or data AI, how do you make sure that bandwidth does not become a concern or connectivity does not become a concern, and you're getting those AI value at any given point? Thirdly, on the technical side, the what you've seen is the limited IT expertise available at the store. As this infrastructure becomes more complicated and more advanced, how do you make sure that the IT expertise is available to help manage and scale the infrastructure at the edge? Secondly, I think Munib touched upon the data security and privacy aspect of it. I think that's going to be a huge concern, especially you can imagine in a retail store, the retailers are collecting tons of very sensitive customer data. So how do you make sure that the AI systems actually adhere to a very compliant model to address these data privacy and security issues, adhere to compliance like PCI, DSS, and GDPR, and protect customer data as and when required. A lot of investment will need to be done on the governance, data governance, security protocols, and also monitoring on a regular basis, right, to make sure that data is secure and protected at the edge. And I think finally, which we are all realizing, is how do you justify the ROI of investment? As we talked about, the significant new investment the retailers would have to make across the stack, whether it's hardware or software, and also around training models, deploying these models, and maintaining these models. And I think it is where the retailers would have to think about the use cases where they can actually justify the ROI, which again becomes extremely challenged when you talk about smaller retailers, where the cost might actually outweigh the potential benefit that they might have. So I think those are some of the concerns that we see in actually scaling the AI applications at the edge from when we think about the retailers.
Yeah, absolutely. Ultimately, it has to serve the business, right? While navigating some of these barriers. So this is good. So we've talked about some of the outcomes we're seeking and kind of the barriers that are being faced. Abhi, you mentioned that the IT infrastructure at the store level could very well be a barrier and not be ready to deliver the value of AI or support AI enabled applications. So this might be a good time to talk about the concept of edge infrastructure or local infrastructure. Edge computing is another term that's used to describe the same sort of thing, and how it could be relevant in this case. So why don't we talk a little bit about what is edge computing and why might it apply? Why should we think of this problem space in that manner? And what are some of the primary sort of technical and operational decisions that we'll need to make around this? So, Maniba, I'd like to start with you again. Any thoughts about edge infrastructure and intelligent edge computing?
Yeah, no, I think edge has been kind of emerging as, I think in the continuum of data center, cloud, that we've been kind of living through in the last 3 or 4 decades, edge is starting to become more prevalent. And I think one of the reasons it's becoming prevalent, all the reasons we're talking about, is the data gravity, right? So more devices, more things are creating data, and while that continuum exists, um, central intelligence exists in the cloud, there is some amount of processing that needs to happen at the edge to drive efficiencies. And that's probably what's driven the workloads to happen at the edge, like all the use cases we've talked about. Some of the foundational principles we can think about to driving edge computing, call it law of the land, right? I have three laws, not Newton laws, but three laws of the edge. Law of the land, which is data sovereignty, data privacy. What do you keep? How do you keep it? The law of economics. You can't just take raw video feed from a camera in a store and just push it to the cloud and get it all. It doesn't make sense, right? The bandwidth is not unlimited or free. So law of economics of how much can you actually send it all into the cloud and process it. And the third is probably law of physics. How fast can you kind of close out some of these laws? Prevention and things takes, or if you're a manufacturing, other example, extreme, you're dealing in microseconds and milliseconds of factory floor equipment. But even in retail, you come up to those loss prevention use cases. Somebody has stolen something and they walk out of the store in 15, 30 seconds, not enough time to go somewhere and compute. They need to be stopped from stealing, because once they leave the store, it's too expensive to, actually put a court case and legal and authorities to chase after a $5 item, right? So call it the three laws of the land, law of physics, and law of economics is what's been driving a compute footprint at the edge. So you can process this. That's kind of one dimension of how these things are converging in the need for edge compute. The other reason, in the last question I was responding to, you're starting to get these point siloed solution. Oh, I have loss prevention. Here's a closed box for that. I have digital mirror solution. Here's a closed box for that. I have a digital signage solution. Here's a closed box for that. So like, cooler screens. Here's a closed box for that. Now, to Abhi's point, he said, you don't have too many IT people. This is not a data center, right? So you've got the most expertise is to switch off and switch on the power, right? So I would say the drive to that edge compute is, how do I take a lot of these, call it workloads, consolidate them on a single server, and then not have these siloed equipment, and then manage it all through the cloud. So, like, well, yes, I'm talking about edge compute, but it is a continuum of the cloud going to the edge. While you can, the striking the right balance between the cloud and the edge is what needs to be locally processed, what needs to happen locally, while there's value in taking some of that into a central intelligence and processing that. That's kind of the balance we're striking between that edge compute aspect of it. How much, and people won't always get, edge won't start growing as big as cloud, never. It just always be striking that balance and using these simple laws to drive what is that edge footprint going to look like.
Right, without it causing you to have to deploy power and networking and cooling that would be similar to a full data center at each site, because that's not a practical option either. So,
yeah. So you have to strike that balance, and I think that's what
yeah,
kind of evaluating on. It's just, but needs to happen because there's only more data that's going to be generated at the edge, right? So.
right. No, I think you hit on something really good there, which is a concept of thinning data, for inferencing and figuring out how to find the right data and move it back to the cloud and project the power of the cloud out to the local site, but without the sort of power and cooling requirements of the full blown stack. Abhi, what else are you thinking in this area?
No, absolutely. I think what Muni pointed out, right? And there's a value to the cloud, right? Cloud is great for agility, scaling, cost optimization, but also we know that it's very clear that regulations, data privacy, latency, bandwidth requirements require some of these use cases to be run at the edge, and that is where I think it's important that AI optimized infrastructure is available at the edge without the overhead, as Mani pointed out, of data center cooling and the scale and cost and everything that's involved. And that is where I think GDC, we have positioned GDC as a service that brings best of kind of Google Cloud at the edge and enabling those use cases that would not have been possible in the cloud in past, right? which were limited by latency and data connectivity, data privacy, and regulations perspective. Usually, we think that there will be the problem statements that the decision makers would have to address would be very similar to the ones that we discussed previously when it comes to AI. Is the business case, as in what are the business problems that are that are being solved here? Because the edge infrastructure to some extent would depend largely on the business problem that's being solved, and also kind of goes back to our point that we previously discussed around ROI, right? And you want to make sure that your edge infrastructure is not more expensive than the business benefit that you will derive from it. I think the second area that retailers would have to think about is around what's the appropriate architecture and management model around it. When it comes to architecture, think about where what kind of hardware, software, connectivity would be needed. Like think about CPU, storage, security that would be needed to run a specific use cases at the edge. And then coming back to the management aspect of it, I think whether roles and responsibility around who manages the stack at the edge or being at the central is going to be extremely critical, and it also defines what the how the edge infrastructure would look like, what would be the cost, and whether you have as a retailer expertise to run such kind of centralized or distributed managed edge kind of infrastructure. I think those are some of the key considerations that the decisions makers would have to keep in mind while they're making these decisions.
Right. So it needs to be dead simple, low power, highly cost effective, no problem, right? In fact, I think this is a really good segue to kind of talk about, in particular, how Google Distributed Cloud and Intel have been working together to try to solve this exact sort of problem, and come up with that architecture that can meet these needs. So, Abhi, I'll start with you. Why don't you can you help us understand a little bit about the joint solution that you folks have been working on with Intel?
Absolutely. So we developed GDC again based on these feedback from that we got from customers across industry verticals. We developed GDC as a fully managed hardware and software stack. To some extent, that extends the GCP's AI optimized infrastructure to the edge, including the foundational model that everyone wants to leverage to build new interesting use cases. AI Anywhere is something that we have been very focused on day one on GDC side when we launched GDC in 2021. And again, the whole idea is you actually start in cloud. Cloud gives you the scale and agility and innovation, and then you extend that to edge. And you all do all of that through a connected interface within Google Cloud. You leverage AI that has been built within the cloud interface on the GCP interface and extend it to the edge using the tools that you are already comfortable using on Google Cloud, like Dataproc, Vertex AI. So that's just from the tool side, but also when it comes to applications, right? I think there are a lot of applications being built in the cloud. Those tools and applications, how do you move it to the edge? We're just trying to kind of create this seamless experience for our customers so that they can choose where they want to run their workload. If for some reason they cannot run it in cloud, how can we make it super simple and easy for them to run the similar experiences at the edge, again because of data privacy, connectivity, or other challenges that they might have. So that's what we have focused on from GDC perspective.
Yeah, excellent. Muneeb, what has Intel's role been in all of this?
Yeah, no, we've been partnering with GDC team and we're enabling. So I guess I think it's very similar terms where, I think, Abhi used AI anywhere. I think we have AI everywhere. But the idea is how do you proliferate, the intelligence everywhere, right? So I think that's the foundation. And how we've partnered with, of course, you understand from the Intel perspective, we build out silicon both for the server side of things as well as the client side of things, right? So our core silicon goes into point of sale systems, all the edge devices you can find, and our server style kind of Xeon silicon goes into more of those edge compute servers. So think about how that plays out in the edge space. What we've done is, on top of that silicon, we've enabled, call it an AI runtime. We're all used to, hey, hypervisor for virtual machines, or container runtime for containerized applications running on bare metal, which are all very application focused. We're going to have AI runtime, which has been very focused on inferencing, by the way, right? So which we launched in 2018, called OpenVINO. So over the last 6 years, we built a lot of kind of edge inferencing muscle that runs on both these servers and device type of silicon. And we're able to provide that for you to take any pre-trained models in the cloud, but then inference them right at the CPU level. We just talked about, hey, low power, power optimized, performance optimized. Because what you're finding is it's not a heavy training uplift. It's just each of these devices are, just inferencing very small kind of, capability, which is very, very contained. So small type of, models that's being, so we're working, we brought to market something called Intel Tiber Edge platform, which is what we worked with GDC on, but it fundamentally provides this AI runtime in all these devices. So you can actually do inferencing, consolidate that, and do that at the edge compute level. So the devices itself have capability. They centralize to the server, like we work with GDC and have all that capability. One of the cool things about this is this business kind of grew out of our IoT business. So if you think about IoT was what's been happening in the edge. So we have been doing that for about a decade. We have about 200 million IoT silicon install base that's still active in the last 5+ years. We can now push this AI runtime because it's N minus generations compatible. So suddenly enabling AI in a brownfield environment becomes very attractive because you're able to now take the data that you can get out of all of these point of sale systems or cameras or whatever, and then suddenly start building inferencing models, because people generally think if they want to go down an AI path, that's a huge investment. They got to put a lot of new hardware, new infrastructure, new power. We're able to actually just come in and mine the data, like you talked about, thin the data right at the source of the data by doing these inferencing models. So our collaboration with GDC has been great because they provide all the app, the cloud intelligence, the app distribution orchestration pieces. We're giving them that silicon and the runtime to actually execute some of this more power efficiently and performantly. So.
Yeah, one of the things that we didn't happen to touch on is that Google Distributed Cloud and Google actually does provide operation services for these deployments. So that's a big load off the mind of retailers who they don't have the expertise to do the local monitoring and maintenance. So
Yeah, absolutely. But that goes with the point that the IT expertise that we believe that's available at the edge might not be able to fully manage the complexity of the new hardware that
yeah.
we're deploying, and that is where a kind of a centrally managed kind of model where Google GDC kind of manages it centrally could be very beneficial for retailers who are looking for scale at the edge.
Yeah, and as well as the opportunity to or the capability to run in an offline mode, because one of the big concerns is you can't do this all in the cloud. You don't always know that you'll be connected 24/7 with no interruptions from a wide variety of remote sites. So being able to run and for instance clear point of transactions locally without having to go run an application in the cloud to do that, pretty important too. Okay, well, good. This has really been fantastic. Excellent thoughts, excellent discussion, lots of great insights. I think there's a lot here for folks to take away. I'll say from a high level, from my perspective, I kind of heard three key themes around potential takeaways for folks. First of all, AI-enabled applications really do hold a lot of potential across a wide variety of use cases to modernize and optimize retail store operations and retail store success. Second, I think to get there, what we talked about is retailers really must look at the readiness of their IT infrastructure in their stores and figure out how to move towards this cloud connected edge approach in order to put themselves in the right position. And then lastly, Intel and Google Distributed Cloud really have worked together to put together a specific path to a solution that are designed specifically to handle these initiatives. So, Abhi and Munib, thanks again. Final closing thoughts from your perspectives. Abhi, let's start with you.
Sure. Yeah. No. As we discussed, I believe to harness the full impact of AI across use cases, whether it's customer experience or improving profitability, I think retailers should think across cloud and edge, and decide the deployment model based on use cases for the success of these use cases.
Right, great. And Manib, how about you?
I believe, AI at the edge is going to accelerate the convergence of IT and OT that has had a lot of technical and architectural barriers over the last decade, right? So, because I think all the data problems, operational problems we're talking about, that, AI at the edge is going to kind of simplify that and streamline it. So, I'm excited to see that, retailers leverage AI at the edge and do better business.
Yep, absolutely. It'll be really fascinating to see what comes in the next few years. A lot of potential. So I'd like to thank you both for sharing your experience and your expertise and your insights on this very timely topic. And I'd also like to thank all of our viewers and listeners who spent some of their valuable time with us today. If you'd like to learn more about Google Distributed Cloud and the solutions they're offering here, you can contact the team to discuss a configuration that's right for you by scanning the QR code that you see here at the end of the event. So thanks again, all of you. Thanks to our distinguished panelists and for everyone who joined us today for your time and attention. And have a great day.